Well, hi, amazing parents, and welcome back to Raising Amazing Kids. Today, we are talking about one of my favorite topics, 2-year-olds. Terrible twos, how to turn terrible twos into terrific twos. So I want you to know that I have 8 children, and they were all 2 years old at one time or another. And I remember starting to hear the phrase terrible twos back in the late 80s. And by then, I'd already had 5 children, and I really couldn't relate to what a lot of parents were saying. Well, then I realized that what the reason why was because when my oldest daughter began to enter that phase of the terrible twos, that was when I stumbled across my very first parenting class. And I went to the class and I came home with tools the very first day that got me the results I wanted. And that's when I realized it wasn't my daughter that needed training so much as it was me. And so I, was fortunate then to have these tools to engage my daughter peacefully that I acquired early on. And so what I want to draw from that for you today is that it isn't so much the twos are terrible, but it's that we don't understand how to engage with our children. So we make it terrible for ourselves, and not only for ourselves, but for our children. I mean, they don't like it any more than we do when they're throwing fits and we're arguing and fighting with them and trying to get them to do what we want, and nothing seems to be working. And so I think it's time that we take back the terrible twos and turn them into the terrific twos that they are, because it really is a wonderful stage. And so the first thing to help you turn the terrible twos into the terrific twos is to understand the stage and what is actually going on with your child. So the reason that your child seems to be defiant, they're not defiant. They're actually just learning that they are individuals. And so that's when we hear them, their favorite word is no. They want to exert their individualism. And so they do that by saying no. So if you understand and realize that you are an individual, then you realize you have an individual voice. And so that's what's happening during this stage. And so what we do is we try to suppress that voice, which is the last thing you want to do. So, do you want to take away your child's no, his ability to express himself, his voice? And no is the most basic self-defense mechanism that any of us have, our ability to say no. So in those early formative years, when the child is first discovering this word, first discovering that he's an individual with an individual voice and an individual mind and thoughts and opinions, that isn't the time to squelch that. This is the time to honor that, to acknowledge that they're individuals, to acknowledge that they can have their own ideas and their own desires and their own wills and that sort of thing, and to guide them, to show them how to use that in socially acceptable ways. That's really all that parenting is teaching our children to get their needs and desires met in socially acceptable ways, right? That's a big part of it anyway. So 2 years old is a perfect time to start, because this is when they start pushing back and start exerting their individualism. And so what do you do when your child says no? That's all fine and great to understand that they're developing this understanding that they're separate from you. Because the reality is, before that age, when a baby is born, he does not realize that he is separate from his parents. And so that's why they have anxiety when they're separated from you. It's like, where did I go? And so as they develop and grow, they start realizing, oh, I'm a separate being from my parents. So I have a separate voice and I have a separate life and I can do my own things. I don't have to listen to them. So when your 2-year-old says no, the first thing to do is not to shut them down or try to shut them down, because then overpowering them is not an effective way to train them to be self-directed. And that's the ultimate goal, right? So we want to empower them with the ability to be self-directed. So this is a perfect opportunity to start when they're 2 and they start expressing that individuality in the form of no. So when your child says no, the first thing you want to do is remind yourself that he's not being defiant. He's simply expressing the fact that he's an individual separate from you. So I don't know if you've ever had, I'm sure you have, if you have a 2-year-old or any children, older children, is when they say no to whatever you offer, even if it's their favorite food. It's just because they like saying that no, no, no. They love feeling that independence and that power over their own lives. And that's what we all want. And that's what we need. We just need to train them how to use that control over themselves for their own good. So when your child says no, the first thing is to realize that he's not being defiant at all. He's just expressing himself. And that'll help you relax and not get offended and defiant and defensive. And, then the battle starts and the power struggle and nobody wins. So step one, just relax and smile and just think to yourself, oh, yes, he's expressing his individuality. He's expressing his own will. That's not a bad thing. It just needs to be directed. So acknowledging that by saying, oh, so what do you want? I use this a lot with my kids. It works great because all of a sudden, instead of you telling them something to do, you're asking them what they want. That's the most empowering thing you can do for a child. What do you want? And they're like, oh. And most of the time it catches them off guard and they don't know what they want. And you can just say, how about if I help you? Or how about if after we clean up, we will have dinner or go for a walk or whatever it is, or call daddy or something fun. So you're teaching the child that first of all, his desire is okay. His will is okay, that he wants something different from you. You're letting them know that there's something past what you're asking him to do. So we're going to clean up, but then there's more to life than just cleaning up. We're going to do something fun after that. So you're helping them see beyond. You're also subtly and subconsciously communicating to him that you are going to clean up. It's just a matter of when and how. And so you're not negotiating. Please don't try to negotiate with your 2-year-old. A 2-year-old does not have logic ability. So don't try to reason with your child and tell them why they should do it and why they have to and all that kind of thing that we try to do with our 2-year-olds. That is just frustrating for them because they have no clue what you're talking about. And it's a waste of breath for you. So we need to understand how 2-year-olds process information, clear and direct. Concise, clear, concise, and direct, black and white. They don't understand logic. If you don't do this, then that, and da-da-da-da. Not until they're 8 years old. They can't even separate fact from fiction until they're 8 years old. So expecting a child, a 2-year-old, to be able to logic something out with you, you're wasting your time and breath, and you're frustrating and exasperating your child because they don't understand what you're saying. So, we're going to pick up toys now. That's it. It's a clear direction. And he says, no. You go, what do you want? I want to play. Oh, okay. That sounds like a great idea. How about if we play for 2 more minutes? And then I'll help you pick up. And so you always want to keep it in a positive, upbeat, I'm on your side kind of feel when you're communicating with your 1-year-old or 2-year-old to make sure that they feel, safe. If they feel that opposition, they're going to push back. That's automatic. They don't choose that. See, we have to understand that 2-year-olds, they operate more like a computer than a human. And so if you're pushing that opposing button, they're going to push back. That's just automatic. They don't choose that. And so you always want to just have that camaraderie feeling to the conversation. Like, I'm on your side. I'm here to help you get this done. And then one of the most valuable things you can do in these situations is to shape your child's self-image. So how do you do that? Well, he says, no, I don't want to clean up. And you say, you're so helpful. You always clean up for mommy. What? He'll look at you funny when you say that. And you're thinking, how can I say that when he doesn't? Because it's your job to tell him who he really is. So if he's not cooperating, well, tell him he's cooperative, because you will get what you say. And if you define what you don't want, he'll become that. And when we define something that is what we call wrong, and it actually just condemns the child. Oh, you're wrong. You're in the wrong. So that doesn't help him at all. But if you tell him who you want him to be and who he really is and how God made him to be, then he will be that. And I have some pretty incredible stories of how this works instantaneously. With 2-year-olds, it'll work instantaneously. You just go, you kind of act surprised maybe. What? You always do what mommy says. You're so helpful. Do you know? And then divert their attention maybe. Do you know where this toy goes? I bet you know where all these toys are. I bet you can pick these toys up in 5 minutes. I'm going to set a timer and see, can you pick them up in 5 minutes? Make it fun, make it a game, make it positive. Tell them you believe in them. Tell them who they really are. So helpful. And I tell you, I had the opportunity to learn this firsthand on the spot when my youngest son was 2 years old. And he had tipped over my piano bench and broken it. He had this obsession with tipping things over. And I had warned him, do not tip over my piano bench because those things are top heavy and the hinges were on their last thread, hanging on by a thread. And so I come in the living room one day and there it is. He tipped it over and the lid was the tiny little hinges they put on those things don't make any sense, but they were broken. And I was pretty frustrated. And so I put on my mean mommy face and I said, you get over here right now. Of course, he was like, I don't want anything to do with that. And so, I inserted his middle name and thought that he would listen, like we all do. We think if we use their full name, that has more impact. And he, the harder I pushed, the more he just was standing there with a defiant stance, had his arms crossed, had his back turned, and was looking over his shoulder at me going, I'm not coming over there. And so anyway, first of all, my expectation of him for a 2-year-old to remember that I told him not to do something that he does impulsively because it's fun. And for whatever reason, it scratched some mental itch for him. And he just liked to tip things over. And so, I all of a sudden I'm standing there and I felt a little inner nudge say, tell him he's obedient. And I thought, what? And I was seriously upset. So it took a minute for me to gain my composure. So I collected myself the best I could. And I said, Jonathan, well, it wasn't with a smile like that. It was more like, Jonathan, you're so obedient. And he looked at me, just the words. I don't even know how he knew what obedient meant. And I go, and he looked at me and it just took him off guard. I could tell it caught him off guard. And then I relaxed a little bit because I could see I was getting a different response. And I thought, okay, I think I'm onto something here. And so I said it again. I go, you're so obedient. And then I started to be able to smile because I'm relaxing. I'm saying what I want. I'm telling him who he really is, what God made him to be. Helpful, obedient, and I'm being what I'm supposed to be, which is teaching my child who he really is, creating his self-image. So by the third time I said, Jonathan, you're so obedient. You always do what mommy says. And I just smiled real sincerely by then. He spins around, bursts into a grin from ear to ear, runs across the room and flings his arms around my neck. I was seriously astonished. I thought, what have I discovered? And I even made up a little song. It was just short about, the scripture says when you do what your parents say, you'll have a happy, long life. So I made up a little song about that. And I would just sing it to him, just training him, right? In the truth and who he really is and who I want him to be. I want him to have a happy life. And of course, we want things that are good for our kids. They don't, like I said, they're not choosing, at 2 years old, they don't know anything about life or parents or what our intentions are, at least very much. But he picked up on the heart of what I was saying. And so he responded to that. And that's why our kids resist us when we're angry or upset, because they're picking up on those negative vibrations that our heart sends out. when we're in a negative mood. And so by switching ourselves to positive, helpful, expecting the best, believing the best about our kids and communicating that, then your 2-year-old is gonna, it's gonna turn your terrible twos into a terrific twos, because they really are becoming such wonderful little people at this age, individuals with their own personalities, and they all have different temperaments. Some of them go from zero to 60 in a second. Others are more mellow, but either way, this technique works. Is honoring their individuality. Ask them what they want. Just the fact that you ask them, when they say no, well, what do you want? They'll say, well, I want dinner. I want to watch TV. Okay, that sounds good. Let's do that right after we pick up the toys. You're so helpful. You always do what Mommy says. Thank you so much for helping me. And I'm telling you, you will create such a different atmosphere and attitude in your 2-year-old if you just try those 2 different things and kind of blend them together. So I hope that's helpful to you guys. I'm telling you, it made the difference, night and day difference for me. And, just being very clear and direct. Don't give your child lectures when they're 2. Don't try to reason things with them. They can't. And so just talk to them in a way that respects their level of understanding, and realize that they're going to respond automatically. They're not even choosing a response. So once you find the right buttons to push, you'll instantly get a different response. And that's what I experienced with my oldest daughter after that first parenting class. And that's when I was like, wow, I am actually in control of the outcome here, and I can push different buttons and get different results. So I hope that's helpful to you. We're going to talk more about 2-year-olds in the next video. We'll talk about tantrums a little bit, and we'll get into a little bit more of how you can communicate on their level, and so that they can hear what you're trying to say. Kind of like if someone speaks Greek to you and you don't understand Greek, then you can't respond. And so we'll talk a little bit more about how to speak their language. All right, thanks for watching today. I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.